I've read a book for every single month in 2023. A year before that, like 3 to 4 max. And a year before that year, like 1. Just out of respect for my girlfriend who gifted me the book. It was a reread of The Alchemist from Paulo Coelho, the first book I read from cover to cover in my entire life. Before that, I read it when I was 14 and had one of those Matrix moments. Like, once you see the world for what it is, there's no coming back type of moments. The main idea in the book was the pursuit of your own legend. It is that you find treasure inside of yourself rather than searching for it in the external world. I didn't read a single book until I was 18 years old, and after rereading The Alchemist, I thought to myself, why don't I read more books? The question bothered me as I thought I'd missed out on a lot, but the truth is that I had a deeply ingrained resistance towards books. The next rational question is, where does it come from and why? Media consumption was not my weak link. By all accounts, I should have been a book person. I read a lot of research in my free time, I watched a lot of podcasts and went to a lot of seminars, so not wanting to learn was not a problem. Maybe I was just a different type of learner, maybe I just wasn't the book type. The other options just seemed better. I could listen to a podcast while I'm driving, I can go to a seminar and socialize, I can read research at home on my computer, and books just did not make any sense to me at all. Then I saw my younger brother develop something called reactance in psychology. It's when an individual feels that something is limiting his choice of decisions. In simple, it's when somebody is pressured into doing something they do not want to do. He fought with all of us. The kid did not want to read the books assigned to him in school. He didn't have a phone, any social media, or the chance to listen to podcasts and absorb any other type of media. So naturally, I looked at the only thing pressuring him into reading, and that was his school. It really is the main villain. The education system catfished us all. I want you to think back to the days you were in elementary school. Try to visualize this. The sounds, the smell, the feeling, everything, the complete experience. The books back then were pure gold, like they were so interesting. We had maybe 3 or 4 of those and I used to play with them all day, every day. I'm talking encyclopedia with visuals, paper coming out of that, the rubbery parts of dinosaurs, like those were the books. For years we used to play with the same ones and every time they brought us the good balance of learning and playing. Then one day everything changed. They flipped the switch. We went from cool encyclopedia to boring novels and poems. It's just like when a drug dealer gives junkies the pure stuff and then when they're hooked, he cuts the dose in half. That's what that felt like. And that's my theory on how we lost trust in books the education system gives us. They killed reading for us, but how did they do it? In school, you read as a chore and analyze in the classroom with everybody else. I see 3 problems with that approach. The first one is reading boring stuff. The schools never have any fun or popular books for kids to read, and I get that the classics are important and that commercialized books are not as complex, but they're missing the point. The classes never even get close to analyzing anything deep from the books because of time, plus the students who dictate the reading levels, hence everything you read in school is diluted. The second one is reading at the same pace as everybody, and we can pretend that everybody is the same and that there are no differences between the kids, but this is not a politically correct channel, so there are differences in a lot of things. The first difference are prior habits and experiences. Some kids might like to read, some might not. Some have a 5-year experience in reading, some don't. The second difference is cognitive. Some kids might develop faster, some slower, some are right there in the middle, and we also have to take into account the periods of development of those kids. For example, I didn't develop any time in terms of reading until I started working around 18 years old. And the third one is upbringing and beliefs. We're talking about habits at home. Some kids have parents that read a lot, so they will be into reading, simple stuff. You don't have to be a psychologist to get this. But I completely get that some things need to be standardized and that we don't have the infrastructure for personalizing every single student experience. I mean, you can get something close to that in private school nowadays, but that's about it. Reading depth. I mentioned this one before, and I have to say it again. Reading doesn't happen in broad concepts. Marcus Aurelius says, I learned to read carefully and not be satisfied with a rough understanding of the whole. Stoics teach us that in order to learn, we need to deeply absorb what we're consuming, and the classroom won't learn anything from 45 minutes of shallow chapter analysis. Well, that is supposed to get them interested, so they can pick up that by their own and go into depth by themselves. Are you kidding me? Have you done that when you were a kid? Do you think kids want to read novels you made boring in their only spare time off? They want to play video games and go out with their friends, and that's about it. Other factors. I'm not blaming the whole book thing on schools. I get that there's a lack of focus in kids because of social media and the dopamine it's feeding them, but it's at least half the problem by the sheer time they spend in school, which is around 8 to 10 hours, 5 times a week. I mean, my generation didn't have any smartphones back then, especially where I lived. We started getting those at around 14 years old, and social media wasn't as strong back then, but we still resented books. However, social media consumption has become a large problem, but I see forces of resistance though, which is good. I am one too. My philosophy is that social media is to be used as a tool, but not as a reality escaping mechanism. So if we teach our kids that, they will understand how to use it. We will not get into how the school system should fix all of this, as that is not the topic, nor am I mature enough to tackle that problem yet. When I read a few more books, I will be. But the focus is now on how you can unwire your wrong beliefs and how you can start reading books consistently so you can gain the knowledge that sits in them. Before we can do all of that, you have to know why you should aim to read more books in the first place, and I'll present my arguments right now. According to me, there's 3 reasons why everybody should read books. The first one is obviously health, and I read a research-backed article that I will drop a link into the description if you're interested in reading that, but they found out that reading is linked to lower dementia, better memory, and better emotional regulation. You may know a famous quote from Blake Pascal, and he says that all of humanity's problems stem from a man's inability to sit in a room alone with himself, and I can't express how much I agree with this. That's one of the reasons why I tend to read so much, and it just gets me thinking and problem solving in my own head. You can't avoid thinking when you're reading, and my experiences with people who read is that they're very mindful and aware of their words and actions. So if you want to become a sharp person, both in your thoughts and the way you speak, reading is the way. The second one is to get ahead, and if you plan on progressing in your life, you have to get ahead of most people. The ones who say life is not a competition have either not experienced the real world yet, or are so ahead of everybody else that they don't see the fights happening in real time. Fact is, reading has always been for a small part of the society. Here are some stats. The global literacy rate is 87%. That means 13% of the world cannot read or write. 75% of those people only read a book a year, and only 46% of those people read a book a month. So if you read more than 20 books per year, you're inside the 27% of people who read. And from there on, the percentage plummets even more if you are aged between 18 and 34, read self-help books, or avoid mindless reading. If you already tick these boxes, you are ahead of a lot of people. And if you don't worry, we'll get you there in a moment. And the last one is knowledge of the wise. I like to read old books. Why? Because they stood the test of time. And if you ever tried anything from an old book and it worked like a charm, you would look at it as gold. When it first happened to me, I asked myself, how did these people discover this? But to put this in perspective, Dale Carnegie wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People before the Second World War. He founded his education programs in 1912, and it means that years before that he educated himself about human relation and communications. Imagine that 112 years after it was founded and 88 years after his book was published, his education is still considered as the Bible of human relations. And now you have a chance to learn from him for free online. Isn't that like the best thing ever? Don't you feel blessed? I do. There's an even older case of this I'd like to mention, and it's called Meditations. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most accomplished emperors of Rome and a believer in Stoic philosophy. The main idea of Stoicism is the rejection of pleasure as a standard of human happiness. And in that book, he wrote ancient philosophy that has stood ground for over 2 millenniums. He didn't have social media or any other course on philosophy to sell us, but quite contrary, he wrote this all to himself, and only later did people put them all together in a book. Now ask yourself again, why should I read books? The question now became pointless. Am I right? You have a Roman emperor as one of your teachers. That's why. Why do you fail at reading? Reading is like going to the gym. You hate it for a week, after a month it feels promising, and a year in, you're addicted for life. This method of dragging yourself with a book for the first few weeks is fine. Most people will succeed with it. But we do things differently here. So I present you the 3 methods to start and keep you reading. The first method is called from the back. Remember when you were learning how to ride a bike? Did you jump on it and start doing all these fancy tricks? No, you fell 50 fucking times. Your dad yelled at you, your hands were bloody, and it was stressful. Well, it's the same thing with reading. Do not try to read Dostoevsky as your first comeback book. It's not going to end well and you're not going to understand much. I always reduce friction when I try and form a new habit, and the point is to make it easy to start. Instead of trying to hit the problem with a hammer, let's try something called reverse problem solving. It's when you try and reverse something that you want or do not want to achieve. What did they give you in school? Books that are boring and that you do not want to read. But what if you have been given something you find interesting? Then you would probably read it. The answer lies in reading what you like. Naval Ravikant said it the best. Read what you love until you love what you read. And there's no shame in being interested in 50 Shades of Grey or that type of stuff if that's going to get you started. But first you have to start with something that you like, and then when you get used to reading a lot, you can switch to more complicated topics. The second one is consistency. If you think these principles only apply to books, you're wrong. These are the basic principles of forming new habits that are just tailored to reading, but they can be applied anywhere. Reading is slow, and sometimes authors can take ages to get the point across, and that's why you need to, again, start light, and I mean very light. If you devour a book in 2 days, these 3 things are going to happen. You will forget it, you won't apply any knowledge from it, and you won't get the urge to read another one. We want the opposite. You should skim through most books. Just because somebody wrote a book, it doesn't mean it's worth reading. Those worth reading should not easily be forgotten and should be reread a couple of times for them to sink in. When everything sinks in, you will start to use the knowledge that you've gained. But if you haven't done anything with the knowledge the book offered you, it means you haven't learned anything. Applied knowledge is learning. That's why you see all those guys go to philosophy colleges looking like complete dorks. It's because they didn't apply any learnings of ancient Greek philosophers. If they did, they would know Greek philosophers used to train really hard. Socrates was a soldier and he trained in the gymnasium. Cleanthes was a pro boxer. Plato basically means broad, and he was huge. He also used to end debates by flexing his muscles at his opponents. I endorse that behavior and I think we need more of that. But to get back to the topic, if you speed run through a book, as most people do, you will be left overwhelmed. Your desire for reading will be low and you will not seek more. The third one is ADHD solution. Your attention span is fucked up. So is mine. You can't read more than 2 minutes and not think about getting another dopamine hit from your phone. We have to overcome those urges with some unorthodox techniques. As they say, modern problems require modern solutions. You can read books in 3 forms: digital, physical, and audio. And the cool thing is that we can combine these. I combine digital and audio versions so that while I'm reading, I'm also listening, and that keeps my focus from flickering somewhere else, and it forces me to keep my reading pace consistent, thus I end up reading more. It also helps me inject information straight into my brain by combining visual and audio-based learning. I'm using this hack every time I read digital books, and it does wonders in terms of reading efficiency, and it makes reading productive. And that's what I want. Action steps to take. If you want to form a habit of reading today, here's how I would approach it in a beginner-friendly way. Set a time. I read every day at 8 o'clock in the morning. That time works for me. I try reading at night or midday, but my thoughts always end up somewhere else. But in the morning, I have nothing on my plate, and I'm excited to read something new and gain clarity. Just find the time that works for you. A couple of days read in the morning, a couple at night, and you'll see what works. Smush it together. This method is called habit stacking, and the main idea is incorporating your new habits into existing routines. Example, I read every single day while drinking my morning coffee. It's a ritual. It's something that happens every single day. Make reading a part of your routine and you will win. 1 page a day. We already talked about making it easy to start, but this is next level. I like to quantify and measure things. So when I started reading, I started with 5 pages a day. But you can start with 1 page a day, 1 chapter a day, 1/10 of the book a day, whatever measure you like. But be conservative. Don't hype yourself up and go for a half book tomorrow. If you want this to last, start with 1 page a day and go from there. Another thing you can do to force yourself to be more consistent and to take it easy with reading is to read a page a day type books. I would recommend The Daily Stoic from Ryan Holiday, which is what I'm reading at the moment. It's a book about Stoicism, and it helps you understand the world and yourself better with daily lessons from ancient Greek and Roman philosophers. I also read other books simultaneously, but if I don't have the time to read today, I can always do a short page from this book so I keep the habit going. I'll give you 4 easy to start books to get you into reading, and they're about business, human relations and communications, philosophy, and one all-rounder. The first book is $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozi. It's kind of a beginner-friendly guide to making your first real thing in business, and it also brings in a unique point of view with visuals, and Alex also has funny jokes. The second book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and this is a Bible of human relations, showing us how simple things can impact others and ultimately our own lives. The third book is The Daily Stoic. Ryan Holiday is the most famous Stoic of the 21st century, and he wrote a book with 366 pages, 1 page per day, of lessons from ancient Stoic philosophers trying to perfect the art of living. And the last recommendation is The Almanac of Naval Ravikant by Eric Jagerson. It's philosophy, business, and health all combined in one book that gathers lessons from one of the most famous investors of our generation. That's Naval. Bonus: harsh truth about reading. Reading books is ultimately not the fastest way of getting information. If you want something fast, then go listen to podcasts on 2x speed. But reading books is for taking knowledge slowly, implementing it, and rereading it again to squeeze every little lesson out of the book. The lesson I want you to take from this is that books are there to give us a broad outline of what stuff in the real world should feel and work like. So when I'm reading, I take notes and then reorganize them later into actionable items so I can go do the thing after all. And doing is ultimately where the learning happens. You can go read the 50 best self-help books and nothing will change if you don't start doing. Books are here to give us the clear path of actions. They're here to light the fire inside us. It is your and only your responsibility to turn that flame into a wildfire. So start by burning the first page today. PS, if you like the video, feel free to subscribe. It's how you show me support, and also share this video with someone you love that you think this might be helpful to. Also, I'll have my social media links listed below, so follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and also join my newsletter. Link is in the description. It's these videos but in written form with visuals and with a lot more stuff. So make sure you go there and sign up. I've been filming this for like 3 hours now, so I gotta go. Thank you for watching.